Hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. ODAT Nerd here for Devember, day 17. As far as calculators are concerned, I am really not good with dates. What exciting things happened in the world of Devember today? Oh boy, that's a good question. I got pretty cheesed at .NET's ability to work with JSON in a good way. I went over this a little bit in the stream, but the short version is I was hoping that there was a nice generic way to turn JSON string into a generic dictionary to be used the same way as we might use it in Python, but it turns out not really possible. I mean, I suppose anything is possible for the amount of code that you want to put in it, but the code looked pretty awful. I spent a bunch of time spinning my wheels because everybody kept talking about JSON.NET as the library, but it has a pricing guide at the top. And as soon as I saw that, I assumed it was something commercial. But it turns out, I guess you can buy a license to not JSON.NET, but JSON schema.net, but only if you're commercial and you want to purchase one. But if you're open source, you don't have to. Or it was complicated, but I spun my wheels for a long time on that and eventually came up with a .NET JSON decoding solution, if you will, which basically involved, for my test case, which was the patch metadata that we worked on yesterday, coming up with our own native classes and being able to serialize and deserialize them using JSON.NET, which I guess works pretty good. The data can't be in the format that we want it to be. I mean, it can, but again, the code is terrible. We inherently, we want like a dictionary of stuff. And if you want a dictionary of dictionaries, then you got like what looks like a really long multi-generic type thing. Maybe I could get around that a little bit now that I'm more familiar with it, creating the appropriate class. I don't know, but we're not going to worry about that. We know that we can get JSON data from one side to the other. And if we have to fiddle the data around, it's going to be way easier to do it in Python than it's going to be to do it in C Sharp. So we're going to let C Sharp drive the bus on that one, basically. And after that, we started working on the actual protocol of the thing that we're going to be doing and how we want that to work. And I mentioned in the stream, I pulled out my trusty boogie board to create some notes. This is the one of the many of the boogie boards I have. I also have a boogie board blackboard, which is way bigger, and a whole bunch of smaller ones off to the side. Uh, I'm kind of paperless in that regard. So I'm just going to be referring to that down here. Now, we already had an introduction message defined that just has a protocol version. Now, that has been extended to have more information about the host, the client machine, if you will. So along with the protocol version, there's going to be the host name is passed, the platform that we're on is passed, a username and a password are passed as the introduction message. And that's because in our proposed configuration scheme, the build server has a host name and a port that we're connecting to, and then it has a username and a password. So we're going to assume if you have access to a build server, you can build any build you want there. So when the connection is established, you should provide the credentials so the server can vet you right away, and then it knows that communications channel is established for the duration of the connection, if you will. So you're going to need username and password to do that. And just for our own edification, in the server code, when it creates a cache of build files, the cache directory is going to be based on the user that's logged in, the platform that they're on, and the host name that they're on, or maybe just the username and the host name, something like that. We're not sure. The general idea being you could run the same build for the same code from multiple computers, and their caches would all be distinct under the theory that maybe those machines all have distinct copies of the code. So that's why we're doing that. We're going to make sure the protocol version is the first thing in the message, the first in the same position it would have been before byte 3. All the other stuff comes after that. We decided to use fixed length strings because they're easier to decode. So everything is 64 byte except for the platform, which is 8 when it really only needs to be 7 because Windows is a 7-letter word. And if we need to extend the introduction message in the future, We can do that by changing the order of fields or changing them, but always leaving protocol version at that first byte. And anything that uses a version, that protocol would need to know that. We're going to need an error message so that the server can respond back with, no, I don't like you. We already have that. We're okay. We're going to need a message for just general information messages, one of which might be the server saying, I approve of this. We already have that, and we decided in the build output, not in the build output, sorry, the build results panel that we were working on, messages will just be inlined in there. The client can figure that when it sends an introduction message, if the first thing it receives back is a message and not an error, then it's connected and it's okay. Otherwise, the server will send an error and then reject any other messages that it's sent. And then after that, we get into stuff we haven't quite worked on yet, which is set build directory. That's going to be a message that you send to give it the list of build directories that are going to be part of this build, which are those directories you've been working on gathering the contents of. They'll be sorted in a path, shortest to longest by path, like we were doing last night. And the hash of those is what's used to uniquely identify the final folder in the output cache on the server end, so that we know exactly where the files are going to go. And they'll always go to the same place as long as you're building in the same folders from the same machine. That's the theory, anyway. And once we decided all of that, we worked on modifying the introduction message as it currently exists, because it previously only had the protocol version. Now it takes all those extra parameters. And we did that in both the Python version and in the .NET version. And over in our budding client, which is still just a test sort of client that connects, builds a connection, and does stuff, when it builds a connection, the first thing it does is create an introduction message and sends it. It only sends the introduction message on connect. And then after that, it just sends the message you type. And we verified that we can echo those back and forth. Now, I did have a bit of problem getting that to work, and I didn't mention it in the stream. But the reason why that didn't work is because the message code was using a different version of the test code was using a different version of the message class from the message code. We modified it after the plugin had been loaded, which means it's still referencing the version from previous. Automatic package reloader would have helped there, except I loaded the package from my user local source Devember. So even though it's symlinked into my packages folder, automatic package reloader doesn't know that it's a package, so it doesn't trigger. The solution to that is to close the project and then open it from its symlinked copy instead of from my local source directory. Then the paths will all have .config in the name, and automatic package reloader will work. I'm going to do that after I do this and commit up the other changes. But that is all we have for tonight. We're going to continue on this trend, building the messages we need and sort of the back and forth with the server. The next bits are also going to have to include giving the server a bit more smarts, because right now it's still just directly echoing messages back. So it's going to need to start having a state machine in it to know if it has introduced and if it accepted that client or not. And we'll see how that works on Tuesday, December the 18th, which is tomorrow. As of right now, it is time for me to get this off the camera and winging up to the internet, and then go clean up after the dishes that were made, because there was a party in our building lobby today. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can watch old videos or wait with excited breath for the new video to come out tonight and the devlog tomorrow. I leave that all up to you. Until then, stay sublime.